Now I'm going to tell you and the audience how Josh is supporting illegal immigration.
Oh Lord.
So it's just me and Roger again tonight, and Roger and me, and Josh is off supporting the Mexican economy and having a good old time. And he's posting pictures. I'm sure some of y'all have seen him on Facebook if you're his friend. But he's like the poster boy for a few things on this vacation. Number one is SPF 3,500 strength sunblock. That's number one. Number two is laser hair removal for the back. Number three is the poster boy for early retirement for like a Gen X / boomer. It's just like it's and he's having a great time. And I don't mean to bag on him. I guess I'm saying this out of jealousy, but he is in Mexico in a resort. And if you are the cartel, right? And I guarantee this is happening. I promise this is happening. It is happening. The cartel is organized crime. Okay. And what is organized crime best at? Organized crime is best at extortion. You know, they walk into a coffee shop. There's a scene as The Sopranos where they walk into a coffee shop and they're like, so we're the neighborhood protection corps. And, you know, to watch your business, you pay us $200 a month or whatever it is. And they're like, well, this is a relatively safe neighborhood. And they're like, well, it is safe because you pay us $200 a month. Well, I'm not going to pay you. Well, it'll be a shame if a brick comes through your window because that's going to cost you $1,000. You know, because if you don't hire us, we can guarantee you that brick is going to come in your window. It's the same thing with the resorts down in Mexico. The cartel's got their hands in everything. It's like all it takes is one severed head outside of a resort, you know, the front door of a resort in Playa del Carmen or wherever, and they're going to have less business. Like the resort in Dominican Republic. Remember when the person got poisoned and died?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that affected their business. But I'm not saying the cartel did that in Dom Rep, but the cartel does extort businesses throughout Mexico if they're profitable enough. And the resort business is very profitable within Mexico. So the cartel also has gotten into the business. Obviously, they've done drug smuggling. So Josh has got complicit in that as well, by the way. But recently, they've gotten into the business of human, I won't even say smuggling, human trafficking through Mexico. So there were enterprising individuals early on, a few years ago, who were charging people to get them to the border, basically to escort them to the border. And the cartels are like, whoa, 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 whoa. We've got a lot of people coming through here. One of two things are going to happen. Either we are going to get directly involved in this, or anyone smuggling people through our territory is going to pay a tax. Now, the taxing system is very big along the border. You know, you can operate, you, Coyote, can operate in our territory, but you're paying us a tax. Like if the person paid you $700 US to get across, you owe us 1/10 of that or 1/7 or whatever. You're going to pay a tax to operate in our territory. So they're taking a cut, right? So by Josh staying in this resort, right, and paying the resort the money, the resort is paying some kind of fee, some kind of extortion fee to the cartel, to not have a severed head or a shootout right in front of their resort. We'll do our business elsewhere, thereby giving the cartel more money so that they can hire more folks, more Mexicans down there to escort people to the border and tell them how to get across and stuff like that. So Josh is supporting illegal immigration, drug smuggling, and everything else the cartel does. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me ask you this. Are you surprised that the cartel is not more involved at the illegals coming across? Because so like even with the resort stuff, like they have a vested interest as well, right? Like the cartel doesn't want the border to be shut down. They want those resorts as a whole to be seen as safe, because I can imagine when the military years ago, remember when they and I think it's still this way, where they banned soldiers from going to Mexico, and specifically talking about Nogales right there by Fort Huachuca or whatever. I mean, dude, I don't know the numbers on it, but it had to have devastated that economy, right? And then you're also looking at freedom of movement back and forth, people coming back and forth. And the last thing the cartel wants is that border to be closed. And so to have, and maybe it's just my own naivete where thinking maybe they have more control or influence than they do. but are you surprised that they don't get more involved in like, hey, we got to curb some of this stuff? Or like Lukeville, Arizona, where they close it down for like 2 weeks. Like, hey, dude, they shut it down. This is all bad for everybody.
Okay, you're a businessman. Okay, you're a businessman. The border is a large. It's big. The border is long and distinguished, like Slider said in Top Gun. Uh, so yeah, of course. Like okay, so when the border really started kicking off a few years ago, about 3 years ago, 3.5, and it actually kicked off during the Trump administration too, until he shut that down, and COVID kind of helped out with that with Title 42. But 3 years ago, when it really started kicking off, what the cartels, the reflections we were getting from the cartels is like, this is Christmas. And this was kind of before the cartels started to see profitability in getting people across the border, like starting to tax and starting to actually get involved with getting people across. Because what they'll do, and I think we've covered this on the podcast before, is what they'll do is if Lukeville is flooded, right? Now all the border patrol assets that normally would be interdicting drugs and stuff like that are now all pulled to Lukeville to basically hit those administrative tasks because because the current policy, we have to process these people, we can't turn them away. So people who are normally out in the bush interdicting drugs and people who are coming across illegally, like I broke down a couple episodes before, are now at Lukeville. So the cartel, if you remember in Iraq, well, you didn't spend much time in Iraq. What would happen in Iraq was the task force would go to Tikrit and they would start just womping those tier 1 and 2 targets. So what would they do? They'd move their operations to Mosul. And it's like, oh, it's dried up here. Everyone's at Mosul. So the task force would go up to Mosul and start schwacking people, and they would just move down to Tikrit, just in northern Iraq. So it's the same thing with the cartel, right? As long as you have a policy where people are allowed to come in, you can overwhelm certain ports of entry or just areas. Because I think there's an area in Mexico, Yacundo or whatever it is, that's being overwhelmed now. What that tells me is the cartels are now going to move fentanyl through a part where they've pulled assets away. They found a decent route to move fentanyl in, and yeah, it's just a matter of resources and time. So I might have gotten beside your point of they do want it open, of course, but I definitely believe that they're directing traffic, so to speak.
Well, I mean,
And
right now it's so rampant, right? The border crossings that they are going to force, whether it's through this president or another one, executive orders and legislative actions. And so either one, they understand how broken our legislative process is, and really don't have any confidence that anything's going to be done, or they're being short-sighted. I tend to go with they kind of know how our politics work.
you think the cartel's being short-sighted?
Either that, or they believe that our political system is so broken that the border will just never get fixed.
I think it might be a combination of short-sighted is a good word for it. You and I, before the podcast, were talking about big business, like big business, like Fortune 5 type business, and how, we may think that they're all squared away and they're looking at the big picture and they're going to take over the world. But at the end of the day, a lot of them are just looking from quarter to quarter. I think the
Right.
cartel is looking from quarter to quarter. It's like, man, it's Christmas time right now. Let's do this let's get while the getting's good, right? Let's strike while the iron is hot. And they're taking advantage of how it is now because I think they know it's probably going to end, or there's a good shot it's going to end, and stuff's going to get shut down because the rumor right now is so they're making their money while they can. And the rumor,
Sure.
right? What's interesting though, Roger, is that Laredo, Texas, has never really had an influx, and I have to wonder why. Like, what's going on the southern side of the border around
Mhm.
Laredo, where the cartel has not allowed there to be an influx around Laredo, because there's been an influx everywhere else except Laredo. Last I've heard, when was the last time anybody heard of Laredo being overwhelmed? Either way, there's rumors now that Joe Biden in the State of the Union address, I don't even know when it is. It's got to be next week, I'm guessing, because
Yeah,
now
it's
they're starting
coming
to
up.
talk about it, that he's going to make some announcement where he clamps down on the border through executive action, which leading up to election is great. It's like, yeah, because you're 70% underwater on the border. Um, but the implication is, dude, you could have done this 3 years ago, right? So do you think he's going to say anything in the State of the Union about the border?
Yeah, I mean, they've actually done a good job about it. I will say this: I don't give the Biden administration a whole lot of credit, and I say good job. I say good job, optics wise, because the GOP, man, they're chasing their tails, And now the Biden administration has gone on the offensive. Hey, we passed the Senate bill. We just need the House to take it up, and the House won't take it up. And then you got the Ukraine, Israel funding in there. House will take that up because there's no border security tied up into it. Well, we try to do a border one by itself, and you won't take that up. So it's you know we're into the weeds in a lot of this stuff, but I can only imagine from the person who just casually watches the news, and especially with the media the way it is right now, it would not surprise me to see the impasse that we're at last throughout the election cycle. Because I think, and it's all anecdotal, but I think at least from what I see and what I'm hearing, I mean, they've done a pretty good job of spinning this thing. Hey, GOP House, it's on you. And that goes back to what we said several weeks ago. It's like, dude, I don't care if the Senate doesn't vote on it, if the Senate turns it down, whatever the heck they're gonna do, or the president start passing bills, right? Start passing bills and have it sit. And I don't care if you have to do one out of after another, but you can't continue just to sit there and not vote, go on the vacations, this and that, because the current administration is making you look bad, and they're not having to work very hard at it, especially when you have the media themselves that are complicit. Hey, House didn't take up the vote. Sorry, they went on their they went on their little 2 week break. So I guess we'll figure this stuff out in 17 days, right?
Yeah. And I tend to agree with Josh when the Republicans are the best at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Their house, the RNC, GOP, whatever house is just not in order right now. It's there's infighting. I don't know what it's all about. I think we've said before on this podcast, they're kind of running the party right now like a 501c3, like a nonprofit. Like if we started a nonprofit and we got a lot of money coming in uh, to solve a problem, and we've got a lot of money coming in, because nonprofit doesn't mean I don't make money. It means the business doesn't make money. So I'm
Sure.
allowed to give myself, like if we started a nonprofit tomorrow to solve the Armenian oppression in Azerbaijan or whatever, and we started getting an influx of money, and let's say that the first year we get $5 million. We allocate 4 million of that to the actual cause. But it's like, well, I had to quit my job because this turned into a full-time job. So, man, I think I deserve, Roger and I, we deserve $500,000 each, and now we start making that money.
Sure.
4 million went to the cause and 1 million went to our operating and living expenses, right? So now we start making money. So what happens with a lot of 501c3s is nonprofits is it's not in your best interest to solve the problem, because if you solve the problem, now that cushy lifestyle, that cushy BLM lifestyle you had, now it goes away. With there's racial equality in the world, now you don't. Now Al Sharpton, you can't afford them big steak dinners and those fancy cars you drive anymore. You don't have a job. So that's the RNC I see is kind of running like a 501c3. They're destined to lose. We're never going to solve the problem. So these Democrats are so bad. We don't have a majority. You need to give us more money in our campaign coffers, just on and on and on. It's not in their best interest to win. It's not just, that's not my theory in particular. I heard that first from Ben Shapiro. I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They don't have an interest in winning. So it's like, I don't know. There's just all this infighting, and it's like, what's really accomplished by changing the Speaker of the House, and now they're talking about Mike Johnson, forcing him out because he voted for this and that. It's just like, can we just all get on the same page like the Democrats and kick ass for once? Can we just
Yeah.
once, just one cycle? Can we do that? And you got what's his name getting kicked out in New York, replaced by a Democrat.
Oh yeah.
What's his name? And it's just, I don't know, dude. I don't know. I don't want to say the T word yet in this podcast, but Josh is not here, so we can talk about the orange band later. But I don't know, dude. It's very frustrating, and I just don't know how this next cycle is going to go. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I mean, and they're both that way, right? Neither one of them want to solve the problems because it does come down to campaign finance, donate to my cause, donate to my campaign, what have you. Which word is right now that Biden, and that's what part of me thinks Biden's in trouble. But I don't necessarily, and I've said this a couple of times, I don't necessarily agree with all the polls that are out there because now I think the recent polling showed that he's basically losing in every single swing state, to include Wisconsin and Michigan. And, again, I'm not as familiar with the politics up there. I find that very, very, very hard to believe. But I think what it does do is they're speaking directly to the base, to the Democrat. Hey, man, we're in trouble. We're in trouble and we might lose. So if we don't have your money, we're not going to be able to win. Right. So both sides, they use it to line their coffers. Uh, and I think it's very frustrating because if we continue down that road, nothing will get solved. Right. And I think, and I'll bring them up because I did want to ask you about the judgment against them. That was, part of why the GOP, which now, and now it's not even all of them, a lot of them are starting to come around and circle the wagons around Trump. He's going to be the nominee. Nikki Haley gave the state of the whatever in the hell, state of the prime. Dude, I never disliked Nikki Haley. Yeah, I thought she was a smart chick. Seemed to be pretty good at what she did. There's some issues there on personal finances and house bankruptcies with her parents or whatever the case was. But it's like, I thought she did a pretty good job. She was a popular governor. But she has made to me, I think it's burning bridges where over the last several weeks where she is just very, very pointedly gone after Trump to the point of no return to where, hey, you're really not looking to serve in any administration in the near future, unless she's just assuming that after 2024, whatever happens, Trump wins and he does his 4 years, 3 years, as president and a year as a lame duck, at least a year, that she says, okay, that movement's gone and now it's just new politics. But she's really, changed her stride to where, dude, there's a point of no return for her. But with her state of the primary, and I think you've texted a couple of times. I get to the point, dude, where I can't even stand to hear her voice anymore. I can't even stand to hear her voice. And she reminds me a lot of what folks were saying with RDS. RDS can beat Biden. RDS can beat Biden. Yeah, I believe he can, but you got to win the primary first. And the bottom line is she's not going to win the primary. She's going to get stomped out in her own home state. So I think when you look at the Trump train, you got a lot of people that are starting to circle the wagons around him. But again, he is not status quo. He's far from a conservative. We've said that, dozens of times. Now, there are some policies that I like that he that are conservative in nature, right? But when you look at, social, cultural. I mean, he tends to be more liberal on that side of the house. I mean, he was a Democrat before. So, you can't say that he's just, an old school Republican, but what he's done is he's upset the status quo. And I think when you look at, and he had his faults, I get it. And if Josh was here, oh, everybody he hired sucked. And yeah, okay, get it, whatever. He hired some crappy people. I got it. Not everything he did was perfect, but a lot of the things that mattered to me and my family, I agree with what he did. And I think we turned out better for it. Overall, when you look at foreign policy and when you look at what our borders and that type of stuff. But he upset the status quo because I think going back to what you're saying is like, hey, somebody's actually starting to solve some of these problems, and when you start to solve some of those problems, it's hard to get money. Hey, guys, I need you to rally around me one more time. And it's like, well, why? Because you're already, the problems are already solved. What's crazy now, and it's mind-boggling to me the amount of gaslighting that's going on with, there are portions that are doing very well, how they highlight the GDP and gas prices have come down and this and that because, well, there's a lot behind that. Summer blend is, it was over. But you look at it compared to what it was during his years, everything is up. Everything is up. And we even called the inflation thing a year ago, 15 months ago, 18 months ago. Everything is up. But there was so much gaslighting done by the media to, it goes back to Barry's, hey, man, this is the new normal. 1% GDP. That's just the new normal. Get used to that. So in a roundabout way, I'm getting there. Trump had his judgment up in New York. So roughly like $355 million. And what it comes down to is they're saying that he overinflated the value of his assets to get loans, to get business loans. victimless crime. I hate that term because just because no victim doesn't mean there's not a crime. However, banks, they do their due diligence. They loan the money. They got their money back. They got it back with interest. He made all the payments. He wasn't late. He employs a lot of folks. So, I don't know if you've seen some of the fallout outside of just Trump. And this is actually pretty dangerous. And I'm kind of curious. I want to get your thoughts on this. I'll ask it first. What do you think the second, if any, are there second and third orders of effect from this ruling? And the reason I say this is, you've had Kevin O'Leary come out like, hey, I'm not doing business in New York. I don't know why anybody would. And he goes along that rhetoric. And to the point where the governor of New York had to come out and say, hey, we are safe for people to do businesses here. Like if you operate on the up and up, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. But in the grand scheme of things, let's break it down. Trump did nothing different from what I know and what I read with, his business loans than we all do with our homes when we sell them. Okay. So do you think there's actually going to be a quantifiable, second or third order of effect with businesses and people that invest in New York?
Maybe not. Okay. So got a couple things. I'm going to address that. I wrote a bunch of notes while you were talking. You kind of, as I wrote the notes, you actually covered some of them. I was like, shit, I wanted to say that. But first I want to talk about Nikki Haley because you brought her up. And then we'll talk about Trump and the judgment against him, $350 million. But the bond is actually $450 million. So and I will get to Nikki Haley, if Trump wants to appeal, the way the law works in New York is he has to put up $450 million. That's almost $500 million. Okay. So leave that alone for a second. But it's like, how does he come up with that cash? I mean, this is, in my opinion, this is targeted judicial politics. That's it, because it's like, now what happens if Trump wants to come up with $450 million? Yeah, he's a multi-billionaire. I don't know how much he's worth. I should look that up. But when you're worth that much money, like Elon Musk is one of the richest men in the world, Jeff Bezos, who we mentioned offline, one of the richest men in the world. That's only based on if they liquidated everything. All of their wealth is tied up in their own companies. It's the same as Trump. All of his wealth is tied up in real estate and Trump chocolate and Trump wine and these sneakers that Roger, you should show the audience your sneakers when you get a chance, your new Trump sneakers. But
dude, I heard they sold out.
Yeah, they sold out and people are on the secondary market. You guys and your bourbon, man, you should start dealing in Trump shoes. But anyway, he'd have to liquidate a lot of stuff. And in order to come up with $450 million, he doesn't have that just sitting in the bank, I would bet. It's like, let's say he starts liquidating stuff. Well, the news is going to jump all over that. It's like, look at Trump. He has to liquidate everything. They're trying to break him is what they're trying to do. And I do think this is targeted political persecution. But let me go back to Nikki Haley. I'll get to that in a second. Nikki Haley is staying in this race. And we have a listener, I'm not even going to mention the name, who I would really like to sit down and have a conversation with him on why she's staying in the race. This guy's kind of an insider. He knows stuff. I think I know, and I would like to pass this by him. There are some serious donors who have her back right now. Serious donors. Why is she staying in the race? She has no hope of winning because she's been poisoned by some old school donors a la Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney's the same way. She was poisoned by these old school donors and her political career is over. That's what's happening to Nikki Haley right now. It's like if you were smart, somebody has gotten in her ear. It's like, we're going to continue to give you money. You just keep fighting this because we got a plan. We've got a plan and we're going to take Trump down because Trump is the worst thing to happen to the Republic, all so on and so forth. But she sold that soul to those old school donors. And in the meantime, her political career is just going down the toilet. It's just going down the toilet. She's alienating everyone. It makes my ears bleed to listen to her because like you said, I used to not have a problem with her. Now I kind of do. It's like, what are you doing? Why don't you get on the team and come on in for the big win? You could have done yourself so many favors, but I guarantee you somebody out there with a lot of money, because what can her grassroots donations be right now? It's got to be nothing. I guess she's so unpopular. No one wants her. And she's saying all these stupid things. Like she tweeted the other day, I think it was yesterday. She tweeted 12 fellas down, 1 to go. And some dude on Twitter called Lo-Fi Republican replied, "When your husband has been deployed for a week." And it's like, what are you doing? Like in her state of the campaign address today, and I'm getting to Trump, I'm sorry, but it's just I gotta rail on Nikki for a while. In her state of the campaign address today, Trump said something, and he's so bad at hyperbole. He's so bad at it. He said something like, "Where's her husband? Where's her husband?" What he was implying was, and I feel like the media right now, when they interpret what Joe Biden says all the time when he mumbles, but what Trump was saying was, there are sworn affidavits out there that there is no doubt Nikki Haley cheated on her husband. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's like, that's what he was trying to say. It's like, Trump, just come out and say it. Stop with the hyperbole. Just come out and say it, But what Nikki latched onto was, he's deployed. My husband's deployed. That's where he is. And today in her state of the campaign, she talked about her husband and she started crying. It was near the end. She started crying, starting to get choked up and everything. And then right when it was time to wrap up the speech, those tears went away. And I'm Nikki Haley, and we're here to stay in the race until every vote is cast. And there were no tears anymore. It's like, I don't know about you, but like when you had to put down your dog, when I had to put down my dog, and I was actually really upset and I was choked up, that doesn't just go away. That doesn't go away on a dime. It's like, yeah, she seemed just a fake ass, whatever. I'm tired of her. So to the Trump judgment, $350 million was the judgment, $450 million adjusted for, what is it? Whatever, $450 million to actually post bail so you can appeal.
Well, because it's the interest. Yeah, they're talking about the length of time. Yeah. Unreal.
So, and like you said, the victimless crime, I get it. But this one's odd because no one's ever been charged with this ever in New York City. No, never has anyone been charged with this. It's like, it comes to real estate valuation. They're saying he was being shady on his real estate valuation so he'd get a better deal on loans. Well, like you said, it's kind of on the bank to do their due diligence. Well, he said this property was worth $300 million. It looks like it's 280, 250, but we're going to go ahead and give him the loan anyway because he's Donald Trump, and we're going to give him the terms he wants because we know we'll get our money back. And guess what? Every one of those loans were repaid. So it's like victimless crime. I get what you're saying, because just because there's no victim doesn't mean there's not a crime, but the loans are repaid. Real estate is shady. It's shady as hell, especially in New York City, in LA. Let me tell you how shady real estate is. My house, in a year and a half, my house, the one I live in right now, increased in value by $100,000. That's what the city said. BS. I call BS on that. This house is not worth that much. I couldn't get it for it, but they valued at it so that they could adjust my taxes. Now, is the city, if I appeal that and bring an appraiser out here and all this stuff, and they say, oh, no, it's only worth about $20,000 more than you had initially paid for it because, it tracks with, inflation and home value prices and all that stuff. All I'm saying is real estate valuation is a subjective, shady thing. And the fact that he's being, the judgment was, it's just, it does scare people. I guarantee it scares people. Any Republican with a lot of money in New York, I would leave. Because it's like, this is a bad sign, because it's a targeted political persecution. That's what it is. Now, you and Josh are all on board with, okay, we got to start playing by their rules. So if Trump gets elected, if Ron DeSantis, 5 years from now gets elected, we need to go after them like they're going after us. At the end of the day, I don't agree with it, not necessarily from an idealistic point of view, but because it's bad for business. It's bad for business. But I think we've already crossed the Rubicon. We talk about, this is the same thing with impeaching Mayorkas. And I know that Rodney, the listener, disagrees with me on this. It's like, what the heck good does it do? It doesn't do any good to impeach him. All it does is make us feel good for a little while. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. And you know what it does is we're impeaching, the Republicans are impeaching Mayorkas because Trump was impeached twice where there was no actual crime. So we're just going to do the same with Mayorkas. And what does that do? That undermines faith in the system. That undermines faith in the impeachment process, where it doesn't mean anything anymore. Even Nixon wasn't impeached. It was the threat of being impeached that got him out of office. It all started with Bill Clinton being impeached for lying under oath about the stain on the blue dress. It's like it's cheapens. The impeachment has been cheapened. And I don't know. I could talk about the very first cabinet impeachment, which was it's kind of funny, but I won't talk about that now. But yeah, I think that to answer your question, I think that more money is gonna leave New York, and that's bad for business. I don't think that's gonna it scratched an itch that everybody everybody who hates Trump wants that itch scratched. They got their itch scratched. Now what? It made you feel good for a little while. A rich man has to pay some money. Okay, cool. What did you really do? Did you bring any money into the city? No. If anything, money's going to leave the city. So I don't know. Good news for Florida, though, I guess.
Well, no, but they'll claim that as a victory, because that's what they want. Like part of me hopes that Trump is just, a small part of me. Trump's just convicted and he goes to prison. They will throw parades. Okay. I'm telling you, in blue cities, they will throw parades because that man's in prison. And then you know what they're going to do right after the ticker tape is all fallen to the ground and all the smoke is all settled and all your little firecrackers and sparklers and stuff have all burned out. You're going to go pay $3.50 a gallon for gas. You're going to continue paying your 7.74% mortgage rate. You're going to continue paying your 27.5% credit card rate. And it goes back to your saying, it's like, hey, yeah, you may think that you have some quote unquote, moral victory. We won. We put that guy in prison. Dude, you are still in the same shitty position as you were prior. And oh, by the way, you might hate to admit it, but most folks financially were better off during Trump's administration. Period. I mean, the numbers themselves show that. And that's the thing. I mean, it's they've become totally blind, but they'll claim that victory. As far as there's a fine line because I go back and forth with one of our listeners, who's kind of on your side with the whole, you can't, tit for tat and lawfare and this and that. There has to be an objective that you can accomplish by doing it. You can't simply do nothing. Okay, because if you simply do nothing, like they're trying to do in Colorado, they're just going to remove you from the ballot legally, right? So if you sit back and you do nothing, you'll find that you're not even on the ballot anymore. I mean, people forget. It's like, hey, they are doing this right where you've got, 4 or 5 states that are actively trying to remove him from their state ballots, on a federal election. That is happening. So you have to do something. With the Mayorkas thing, I guess here's my thing with the Mayorkas thing. I definitely support the impeachment of Mayorkas. I think there's reasons to impeach him. But, going back to your analogy, we've used a couple of times now, the dog finally catches the car. It's like, okay, so now what? Like, what was the objective behind impeaching him? Right. And what you have to look at is, and I think the GOP could have used this could have used this in a little bit of a trade when they're talking about voting, because at the same time, you've got the Ukraine-Israel bill, you get the border bill, and they're like, oh, the House won't take it up. Well, Senate, you know what? You won't take up this impeachment vote either, because that's something that you can actually look at and say, okay, now granted, we know the Senate would never pass that, right? But what you do is you get Democratic senators that might be in a little bit of trouble in some of their states, maybe some of those swing states. You get their voice, you get their vote on record. And that's something you can use during the next election cycle, what have you. But I don't give the GOP that they haven't thought that far out. They never do. Right now they're just thinking past the next 14 days, and March 7th is the State of the Union address. I'm kind of curious to see his, because it's not age. I hate the way the media does this because they're like, well, Trump's just a few years behind. Age has got nothing to do with it. I mean, it does. Obviously, as you get older, your cognitive ability declines and whatever. But it's like, hey, man, if he was competent and his cognitive ability was what you would expect of a person, I wouldn't care if he was 95. I mean, I wouldn't want somebody that old in the office because you'd probably die of a heart attack. But like mentally, if you're all there, I don't care what your age is, to that point. But they like to lump it all in, right? Because now it's a numerical objective number. Hey, 77 is too old because Trump's 77, or 81 is too old or whatever. No, it's his cognitive state. But I'm kind of curious to see, the State of the Union, because I think we've seen in the last couple of years, he surprised me, and I think he's probably surprised you as well. I don't know if they just, what do they do? Dope him up on some vitamin B12, give him like 5,000 milligrams, and change his sleep schedule so he wakes up like 24 minutes before the State of the Union kicks off. Like they're literally shaking the dude awake as they play Hail to the Chief or whatever. So I'm kind of. Do you have any guesses or predictions on this State of the Union? Like, what's his cognitive appearance going or disposition going to be like?
I think it'll be. I think it'll be a lot like his last few appearances, especially later in the evening. I think he'll start off strong, and I think we'll say the same thing we always say: he's starting off strong, and then he'll fall apart. Maybe it depends on how long it is. How long are State of the Unions usually? 40 minutes, 40
Yeah, I think
minutes?
some of them have gone like an hour or so. I mean, with him,
Okay.
dude, I'm saying be done under 30, right? I mean, if you're his handlers, dude, you will be in and out under 30 minutes.
I think he'll look good walking in. I think he'll start off strong, but I think, dude, you can only drug somebody up so much, and there are amazing things you can do with drugging people up on, B12. You get some Adderall in there. You stack some beta blockers on there to take the edge off that Adderall. But man, oh man, you won't hear anything from him for 3 or 4 days after the State of the Union because he's just not in good shape. And I'm with you. It's like there's a difference. Like, man, come on. The three of us, I mean, well, maybe not Josh since he's not here. But it's like, man, I'm in better shape than freaking 85% of the 50-year-olds out there, man. I'll stack it up against it, but I'm not going to say I look younger, but I'm in better shape, man. I guarantee you. Cognitively, well, it's debatable, but there's a difference. Age is just a number. It truly is. But Joe is just not. I mean, both my parents are about the same age as Joe, and they're in far better shape cognitively
Oh
than
yeah,
Joe
dude.
is.
I mean, your
And
parents are they similar in age? I
yeah,
don't even know how
similar.
old your
Yeah.
parents are. And your
Yeah.
parents are sharp. I mean,
Hmm.
for I've only spent limited number of days with them, but I mean they're quick, man.
Yeah, and they're not running the country either. I don't know. A couple of things I wish Joe Biden would address. One thing in particular, an article that came out today. By the way, I just looked at this headline. We called this, I think, on the last podcast or the one before. The headline is Estonia Estonia thwarts hybrid operation by Russian special forces in NATO territory. Now, as we said, Estonia is part of the Baltics. What do we say about little green men fomenting stuff within the Baltics? So, folks, it's happening. You need to listen to this podcast. You need to tell your friends about it. You can pass our ideas off as your own, so you can seem smart to everybody. You can seem like
There you go.
Nostradamus in your friend group. But one thing I wish he would address is the recent report of Al Qaeda camps in Afghanistan. Did you see that one?
Dude, who would have thought it?
You
Who would have
know,
thunk it? Right? Who'd have thunk it?
It's we're going to end up bombing those, and we're going to end up doing it from aircraft carriers. But wouldn't it be so much easier if we were doing it from Bagram Airfield with a stay behind force of 5,000, maybe 3,500? I don't know. Just seems like it would be a lot easier to have a handle on that. I wish he would address that because here we are, and I have this T-shirt that I ordered literally, I think 2 days or maybe even a day after the C-130 or C-141, whatever it was taken off, and
Mhm.
the people were running, and we had the cover. I think after a day after that, some enterprising one of these 9-line or whoever it was had a map. It's just a black shirt, has a white Afghanistan outline on it, and it says "all for what" with a question mark. All for what? And it's like I see stuff like Al Qaeda setting up camps in Afghanistan. I'm like, what the hell?
I
20
mean, we're back
years.
to 2000. Yeah, we're
Oh yeah,
literally right back to where we started in 2000.
and we're in worse shape. Well, worse shape. I shouldn't say that, but what did Russia accomplish in Afghanistan? It's like when they pulled out, nobody set up camps in Afghanistan to attack Moscow. You know what I'm saying? They were just like, okay, they're gone. Let's keep on. Now I would say in that respect, we're worse off than the Soviet Union was when they left Afghanistan. And it's very, very interesting. Yeah, you talk about Russia. I know I'm kind of going off the rails here a little bit, but just talking. It's like Russia is really aligning with Hamas.
Oh
I
yeah.
think they're really aligning with Hamas, and yeah, it's very interesting. They're kind of aligning with some of these Marxist type organizations and Hamas and all that stuff. They're seeing this nexus that they can kind of fit in. And anytime anytime I know Josh is always joking when he says Russia's a bunch of commies. They're not. It's not a communist country at all. It's a fascist oligarchy, is what it is. It's fascist. So they're the new, if you want to call, Nazis, whatever, they're the new Nazis. They're the new fascists. Putin is a fascist dictator, and every aspect of that economy is run by the government. So they're not really communist anymore. They're more fascist. If you're in the inner circle, if you're a nationalist, a Russian nationalist, you're in the inner circle, you will be rich and you will get to help run the country. That's not really communism at all. But anyway, what would you like to hear Biden talk about in the State of the Union?
No, you know what? I think the Afghanistan piece is very valid, and I don't think there's been enough news given to it. And again, I think it's the media collectively not wanting to bring it up because you'd argue that we are worse off, and what you're seeing is now again, you can argue over why we went in, very valid. You could argue over why we stayed so long, probably even more valid. You can argue over the changing of our objectives over the course of the last 20 years. Again, probably even more valid. Uh, what you can't argue is why previous presidents, even with Barry, didn't do a complete withdrawal, because any idiot would see this coming. Every moron sees this. Okay, yeah, we can talk about the broken plates and the broken glasses, this, that, but it doesn't put that back together. You just got to keep other glasses and plates from breaking, right? And if you completely withdraw like he did, that's what happened. Well, one, you've got 13 dead service members that should not be dead. That everybody forgets about that. And now you've got camps set up, dude. We'll be lucky if it's just missile strikes or drone strikes. Hell, I don't even know how many drones we got left. We got Houthis. Did you hear that? They just shot down another one. It's like their fourth drone they've shot down. I don't know how expensive those things are, but I'm imagining they're not that cheap. But it goes back to, it's accountability with our tax-paying dollars. I know it's kind of going round and round in circles here, but one, there was a reason why previous presidents didn't just completely withdraw from Afghanistan. You're witnessing it right now, and what you're witnessing with the Taliban and Al Qaeda, who weren't on the same side. Okay, these guys were not allies. Like the Taliban and Al Qaeda and ISIS, they were not on the same side. But point being, it's a lot like the same card that Russia's playing. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it's like, it's not that Russia is going to be allies with Hamas, right? But who are they going after? They're going after us. And like you said, they find this niche they can fit into. It's like, hey, it's not necessarily about helping Hamas, and that's a side effect. It's a second order of effect that happens, but it's more about the damage that you do to the U.S. And you're finding ourselves right back to where we were pre-2001. Like this is how all this stuff started. And believe me, those radical ideological beliefs did not go away. If anything, you think they got a little bit worse over the last 2 decades? Because you know what? We killed a lot of people in Afghanistan. A lot of them deserved it. I get it. But the way we pulled out, and I don't even know, like, do we even have any State Department representation over there now? What's that footprint over there?
In Afghanistan?
Yeah.
I know there's a footprint. But I don't know what that looks like. I'm sure there's State Department representation there. But I know we're talking to the Taliban. I know that. I know that there's a presence there, but it's not anything close to resembling an embassy or a consulate. So we are there at the Taliban's pleasure, basically. It's understood.
And I'm assuming we don't have a whole bunch of NGOs running around winning hearts and minds of the Afghan people.
I kind of doubt that.
So it's only a matter of time, and you just hope that it's limited to drone strikes. But then again, I mean, now we used to, you brought it up. You started talking about distance. You're probably having to operate out of like Kyrgyzstan. That's our next one that you could, that you could stage something at. But yeah, it would definitely be a lot better to operate out of Bagram, right? There's just this administration from day one, right, wrong, or indifferent. It was whatever Trump did, I'm going to sign an executive order to immediately undo it. And you can't rule that way. You can't, well, it's not ruling, but you can't govern that way, right? You can't
Well,
lead that way. You have to look at what's effective, what's not. And you know what? You hope and pray that we don't have boots back on the ground in Afghanistan, because we've seen this before recently. Well, yeah, Iraq, right? I mean, come on, dude. It's like it's the same thing that's over and over again. It actually pisses me off. But I'm guessing that during this State of the Union, obviously none of that will be brought up. Iraq won't be brought up. He'll bring up, how gas prices are going down. He'll bring up how GDP is going up. He'll bring up how real wages are going up, and how Trump sucks. And if we reelect Trump, that it will be the end of democracy. That's for all of our listeners out there. That is the Reader's Digest version of what's going to happen. I think it's 7 March is the State of the Union.
Yeah, and Trump's worth, as you said, is 2.5 billion, which I thought it was more, but yeah, 450 billion definitely takes a chunk of that.
Well, maybe it was 3 billion until the
Yeah.
450 million.
We called this from the very beginning when we talked about cabinet picks 3 years ago. Oh, we're doing this podcast and the question we asked was, who's going to be running the show? And no one's running the show. If anyone is, it's Blinken. But we all know, and you all know out there, how I feel about the State Department, how wishy-washy they are, how little they truly understand about how the world really works. The stuff that we wish Biden would talk about in the State of the Union is the stuff that Donald Trump should be talking about every day.
Yes.
The Houthis,
Yes.
the stuff in Afghanistan, the economy. It's the economy, stupid. It's just like, you leave all this behind, like foreign policy, all that stuff. It really is the economy, because it's not getting any better. It's really not. It's a slow recovery. And if Joe does win, he will beat Obama's record of the slowest recovery in U.S. history. So at least Biden will have that
8
record.
million jobs, Jack. Look it up.
Did you happen to see the American Association of Political Scientists rated presidents, ranked them? I have something to say about the Houthis. Let me star that real quick before I go down this road. So the American Society of Political Scientists ranked the presidents, and the top two, it's like the top two are easy, right? The top two, and you could argue who's number one or number two, but it's Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. It's like everyone agrees on that. But this list had, first of all, they had Biden at number 14. The 14th best president. Are you kidding me? Like, how can you even determine that right now? It's like, how can you determine that? Because a lot of times with presidents, you have to kind of hang around and see what their policies caused afterward. Woodrow Wilson is a good example. FDR.
Yep.
I mean, good Lord. They had FDR. They had Lincoln at number 1. They had FDR at number 2. Franklin Delano Roosevelt at number 2. Unbelievable. They had Woodrow Wilson at like number 8.
Yeah, I saw that list, dude. Unreal.
It's unbelievable. Of course, who's the worst president of all time? Trump. It's like, okay, worst, really? But when you have Woodrow Wilson at 8, it's like, okay, I can tell you your list is skewed, because Woodrow Wilson is responsible for getting us into World War I. Ending World War I, he was indirectly responsible with the Versailles Treaty and underwriting that, is responsible for getting us into World War II, responsible for leading us down the road to depression. It's like, this guy who is literally, Woodrow Wilson, I'm convinced, is the worst president, worse than Harding, worse than anyone. Woodrow Wilson was the worst, and they have him in the top 10, higher than Reagan. Unbelievable. But it's like, okay, so I heard something interesting today, and I never heard this before, but Lenin, back in the day, the Soviet, Vladimir Lenin, he was once asked, what's your position? It's early in the Soviet Empire, very early, when it was still being set up. This was while he and Stalin were kind of vying for power. They were like, what's your view on foreign policy? He said, I view foreign policy like I view my bayonet. You push where there's mush. Okay. So when someone's not willing to commit, if they're unsteady in where they stand, if there's not a decisive Moab being dropped in Afghanistan, if there's not a, Ginsu JDAM or whatever it is, a Ginsu missile being dropped on an Iranian, leader of their intelligence arm. If there's not a very strong stance, if it's mushy, if your stance is mushy, that's where he's going to push. And going back to Russia, I think that's exactly what they're doing. I think that's exactly why our foreign policy, we are just a mess right now, man, a complete mess. If you ask Joe Biden, don't ask Joe Biden, ask whoever is in charge of Joe Biden's decisions on Israel and Hamas, where do you stand today? They don't know. They're trying to appease both sides. They're not taking a solid stand. Now, behind the scenes, we're standing for Israel. But the public face of that is, we're not sure. We're going to give 10 billion to Gaza. It's kind of mushy, right? And with the Houthis, it's like not only did they shoot down a drone, they sunk a British flag ship. They sunk a ship yesterday.
Yep.
U.S. ships are being fired at, and it's just like if we're going to have boots on the ground anywhere in the near future, it's going to be Yemen. Because you remember a couple weeks ago, week and a half ago, it was like, oh man, we're taking it to the Houthis, man. It's going to be strikes and all this stuff. And there was the news coverage of the late night Tomahawk launches from the ships, a la 2003 and back in Desert Storm. It's like, what the hell good did that do? It looks like
targets in Iraq.
It didn't look like it did pretty much anything to me because they just sunk a British ship. It's like this. It's like you said in Red October. This is going to get out of hand. This situation is going to get out of hand. It's just, man, there's so much uncertainty right now, and it's because of that mushy foreign policy, and no one is running the ship. And you can hate Donald Trump. You can hate him, but he kept China at bay. He kept Iran at bay. He kept Russia at bay because they didn't know what the hell he was going to do. It'd make that a good thing or a bad thing, but we sure as hell weren't involved in any wars, really. We didn't get in any new ones.
So, wait a minute. So are you saying that when they were asking Joe Biden what his response to Iran and backing the Houthi rebels and attacks on the U.S. when he said, don't.
Yeah.
Don't.
God. Well, they
you
did.
Don't think they took that to heart? They didn't take that to heart?
It's amazing. It's amazing how incompetent this administration is. Have they done anything good in your view?
Nope. I honestly, when you sit here objectively and you try to think about it, it's like, yeah, I don't think, I would probably have to do some pretty deep gurgling to find something like, oh, you mean the Biden administration did this? Okay. Yeah, I can probably get behind that. No, because it's every major issue anyway, like every major issue that impacts our daily lives.
How about this? Okay. Now look, we've talked a lot about Ukraine. We've talked a lot about, the funding for Ukraine. And I just want to get it straight where I sit on this is like, I am not against degrading the Russian military by sending arms and whatever to Ukraine. I'm not particularly against that. I just wish they would tell me that's what we're doing.
It's accountability.
Or because no one's ever said that. No one has ever said the reason we're doing this is to degrade the Russian military. Like there have been pundits that have said that, but no politician is saying, hey, the reason we're doing this, hey, folks, this is a very relatively cheap way to decimate, and decimate means wiping out 1/10, to decimate the Russian forces. No one says that. Or an off-ramp, one or the other. But I was thinking today, it's like, we kind of armed the Mujahideen there in Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
And that helped, start shooting down those Russian fighters and the helicopters. I mean, how much did that cost versus how much we're spending in Ukraine? I know it's apples and oranges. I get that. But it's just like, be honest with us, man. Just be honest. What are we doing here? And is there an off-ramp? That's it. So I would say I would kind of make a half-assed argument that sending arms to Ukraine is a good thing. It degrades the Russians. We haven't escalated too much. Like we don't have official boots on the ground there. I don't know if that would be considered. What do you think? I mean, would that be considered?
No, I think you're on the right track, and it's, One, it's about accountability and then transparency with what our objectives are. And to be quite honest with you, as long as there's some accountability there, like I think you can send a shot over the bow to the Russians by saying, "Hey, you know what? We are going to continue to back Ukraine financially and militarily, with munitions and with material uh, until you leave. Like we are ready to go down this. I mean, you have to be forceful about it, right? And it's a deterrent. So, hey, look, I hope you're ready for another Afghanistan because that's what we're willing to go through, and that's what we're going to put you through, right? And I think, I mean, you can't do it with Biden though, because I mean, everybody he's weak. He's a weak leader, and you can't do it with Blinken because he's weak too. I mean, the whole cabinet's weak. But when you look at previous presidencies, you could say that because you're saying it from a position of strength. And oh, by the way, it's believable. Okay, it's believable. I mean, dude, even Barry. I mean, he made some bad decisions, but even foreign policy wise, I mean, I don't think anybody doubted the guy. My mind is his red line in the sand that obviously didn't exist. But you have to say it with some conviction and like, hey, dude, you're getting ready. Hey, you remember Afghanistan 1980s? It's about to happen all over again, right? And I do think you can argue that point, but the rest of that has to come from one a position of unity. Okay, I mean that's something that you have to put partisan politics aside and actually get with the GOP leaders and the Democrat leaders. Be transparent. Hey, we're going to have some accountability. This is what we're going to do. And oh, by the way, and it just happened. So, everybody's like, oh, the EU. The EU went weeks and withheld funds, months, right? But it's much like NATO. It's not that, and I'm gonna get sidetracked here because I get pissed off at the whole NATO thing where they're talking about Trump. It's like, we actually passed the National Defense Authorization Act, which prevents the president from just pulling us out of NATO. But it's all about, hey, if it's such an existential threat to us, to the world, to world peace, to the European Union, or whatever the case is, then why aren't they playing a bigger role in support? If it's such a threat, the EU should be 100% on board. But up until I think it was either last week or the week before, their funding had actually stalled. They had several countries that were like, you know what? We're not all about this. And we talked about this last episode. There's obviously some competing interests now, right? But when you can't get the people where this is happening in their backyard, if you can't get them to fund more, then why do we need to do it? We are not the world's police, right? And that's my problem with it. And that's the whole point of NATO. It's like NATO, you're supposed to be donating 2.5% or 2% of your GDP. And you know what? Under Trump, countries were starting to meet it. Why do we have to fund more and nobody else meets their obligations to it? And again, that goes back to transparency and accountability. So I think a lot of this stuff, and what happens though is you're a Nazi, right? You don't support Ukraine, you're a Nazi. I mean, I think if you look at anything, and it kind of worries me when you were talking about the material, munitions, and training, because it does bring up Afghanistan again with the Mujahideen. It's like, hey, I also want to make sure this stuff doesn't get used against us in 15 years. Can we make sure this stuff doesn't get proliferated throughout countries whose ideas are inimical to that of the United States? And again, it goes back to that accountability. It's got to be measured. It's got to be reserved. It's got to be impactful. And then they've got to be transparent about it. I can get behind that.
I had a plan to solve the 2%. So in order, okay, what the NATO charter says is that, whatever your GDP is, whether you're Germany, France, um, UK, US, whatever, your defense budget will be 2% of whatever your GDP is. And that's going to be more for some countries than others. Greece has traditionally been really close to the 2% because they're arming themselves against Turkey and vice versa. But it's got to be for defense, right? So you got to buy tanks and you got to, have radar systems or whatever. It's got to be your defense budget. So my solution that I shared with the ambassador in Slovenia was, hey, why don't you try to propose, because you got some WASTA, why don't you try to propose in your big meetings that you have with these important people that defense spending, you could justify infrastructure improvement, specific infrastructure improvement. You could loop that in with defense spending. For instance, like in Slovenia, right? Their rail system was decent, but their rail system couldn't support they couldn't support M1 A2 tanks, and it was because of the weight. right? The weight was too much. If you have rail cars full of M1A2s, and it wasn't just M1A2s, they were very limited on the type of track vehicles they could put on their railways because it had to do with, some of the tunnels weren't wide enough. Some of the rails couldn't handle the weight, so on and so forth. So it's like, well, you got a port right there in Slovenia, which is equidistant to the Suwalki Gap as Bremerhaven, Germany. So it's like this is a strategic vital importance that they improve this rail system, and they could call it for defense, right? But what
Sure.
that would really be doing is helping their economy, right? So why can't, I was explaining it to her, it's like maybe loop in infrastructure improvement projects. Like we all know that Hitler built the Autobahns, right? Which inspired Dwight D. Eisenhower to build our
Yep.
interstate system, which that's where it occurred to me. It's like, well, the interstate system that was done with defense funds. Why can't it be the same way? So you get everybody on the same page because, man, when it comes to defending NATO against Russia, it's all about logistics and retrograde operations. That's what it was all about back in the day. If they were going to come through the Fulda Gap in Germany, it was all about retrograde. We're going to have to fall back. We're going to have our logistics lines open so we can start pushing them back. It would be the same way. So it's like you could solve that 2% overnight. You could literally solve it overnight. Now you'd have to be pretty strict with what infrastructure projects, but like even like a 5G type thing for communications, it's like you got to, what do they call it? I'm blanking on the term, the C3 nodes, you could definitely improve your economy at the same time, improve your defense, your defense capability at the same time, because the two are intertwined.
Absolutely.
But we're still thinking in 1950s type mindset. No, you got to spend it on tanks. And Slovenia is over here like, what the hell do we need tanks for? It's like, how are we contributing to the fight? Such a small country by having more tanks. Like, are we the ones that are to be fighting on the front? No, we're the ones that are going to be keeping the supply lines open to send the tanks to the front, whether they come from Italy or wherever. It's like, let's think about this. But Roger, I'm just convinced that I've given the general public, well, not the general public, the people who are in charge of making decisions, whether that's corporate, whether that's, defense ministers, all this stuff, I've given them far too much credit for being smarter than what they really are. So you said that about the funding, and I had to go off on that for a second. But to Tech basketball on, dang it. Crap, missing a Tech game. Dang it, man. I should have put some money on that. Anyway, my wife just texted me. So with NATO, it's like if your parents have been paying your cell phone bill since you were, since you left the house, and you're like, I'm having trouble making ends meet. I'm having trouble making ends meet. Your parents are paying your cell phone bill. They're paying your car insurance. It's like you get spoiled on that. Why would you pay more? And in this case, the U.S. has been the parent for the past 70 years. So it's like they're going to look for every reason not to pay that bill.
Do you know how many NATO countries paid their 2% and above before Donald Trump took president?
Zero.
Or became president?
Wait. Oh, no, I'm going to say the UK, number one. I can't remember if Poland hit after Trump or not. But I thought, okay, this is what my assumption. I thought the UK and Greece. I don't know. You tell me.
So I don't know the countries, but it was 4, including the United States.
So I'm going to say that was UK, Greece, Turkey, and Poland.
Probably. Donald Trump, becomes president. 10 countries hit the 2% and above, only 10. And now, 3 years into Biden's presidency, do you know how many additional countries beyond the 10 pay their 2% and above?
It's got to be zero.
Zero. And that's not staged. That's a legit question to lose. Like, yeah, it's absolutely. And that's the point, right? That's the point. This is their own backyard. And I think it's like what you're saying is genius. It makes complete sense. It's like, hey, look, maybe we just don't have to buy tanks and MRAPs or whatever. Maybe we build up some infrastructure, because guess what? Like they're finding out in Ukraine, you're going to need to have some communication ability, right? You're going to need to have some roads. You're going to need to have some railways. Hey, we can secure, shipping lanes or whatever. Because again, as you're seeing with Ukraine, with resources and food and all that stuff, I mean, all that, especially in Europe and Asia's like this too, especially with Korea, it's all tied in together. There is no like, military industrial base and then just like regular civilian stuff. It's all tied together. And when they go to war, guess what that Kia factory is going to start producing? Tanks. So along those lines, you brought up something, and I kind of want to maybe this will be the last thing that we cover here. You talked about rankings, right? And rankings is very, it's a very sour subject to me, and I get it. Rankings are supposed to be a snapshot, and they really don't mean anything because, like in basketball, at the end of the well, I shouldn't say that. They do mean something because obviously where you play at in the tournament, could have an impact one way or another on your team and how your performance and how you're gonna perform. But I've had a problem over the last couple years because, dude, I don't understand. Like, there's no rhyme or reason to it at all. I mean, even going back to the Florida State thing with the CFP, which, a lot of us still haven't forgotten. And then when you look at this week's, and I'll go ahead and say bye, Ted, because we're getting into the basketball stuff. But,
thanks for listening.
But, you get to this week's AP rankings. And, dude, on my Twitter, I've been calling it every week. Whoever does these polls for the AP, dude, they love them some Kansas. They love them some Kansas, right? So what's your thoughts on this week's rankings and NCAA basketball in general?
Well, I didn't delve deep into the rankings. I was just on Monday. I made sure I looked at Kansas because last week, the bane of my existence, Texas Tech basketball just beat the brakes off of Kansas by 29 points. It wasn't even close. And that started in the first 5 minutes of the first quarter. And I was just like, okay, I'm realistic. I know Texas Tech. I know how good and not good they are. This is just their night. This is going to be their best night of the season. But at the same time, it's Texas Tech, who manages consistently to stay in the top 25, around 23, 24. I don't know if that's just – so anyway, I was like, Roger, do you think that this drives them out of the top? What do you think their ranking is going to be? And Roger's like, they'll stay in the top 10. And I was like, no way. After losing by 29 points, because they did not look good. They look shook. And it's just like any team that's in the top 5 at least can't look shook like they did against Texas Tech, who's really not that great. So, yeah, and they stayed in the top 10, just like Roger said. I think they were number 9. And it's like unbelievable. They went from 6 to 9. They dropped 3 after. It's just awful. Because Texas
look at
Tech
their last month. Look at their last month.
Oh, it doesn't look good. I mean, they'd win 1, lose 2, win 1, lose 1, win 1. It just wasn't good. But I want to talk. And then, so I was asking, my stepson Drew. I was like, "What do you think?" And he said, he was like, "I don't know who legit is number 1 right now."
UConn.
Well, UConn, isn't Purdue up there?
Purdue lost the other night. So they dropped to number 3. Houston's number 2, but UConn 24-2 out of the Big East. I mean,
you had to say UConn because I haven't even been paying attention to like the top 5. I really haven't because I pay attention to my team. I pay attention to the Big 12. They do, the polls the polls do love them some Kansas, and it's just like I didn't even realize that I think I'd seen it. But I don't know who to root against because, our old friend Blue Tick, who doesn't listen, it's like that guy's a UConn fan. It's just like it's same as Phil. It's just like Phil's a Georgia fan. Anytime Georgia loses is a good day for me, same as UConn. But so I want to tell a quick story about last night. It was last night, right? So I'm looking because Texas Tech played Iowa State, and I'm watching that game, and Texas Tech played okay. They played okay. But, man, Iowa State's defense was just on point. And I was like, man.
Oh, you're talking about Houston. Houston, Iowa State.
No. Yeah, Texas Tech played Iowa State a few nights ago.
Gotcha.
So I watched that game, and they just shut Texas Tech down. We couldn't do anything. So last night, Iowa State's playing Houston. And we play Houston, too. Houston didn't shut us down like Iowa State did. And I was like, man, Roger, what do you think about this game? He's like, I don't know. It could be, I don't know. I think Houston's got this one. I was like, what's the point line? And Roger's like, it's 8.5. And I was like, there is no way that Iowa State is going to let Houston outscore them like that. I was like, this is a sure thing, right, Roger? It's like I got to put money on Iowa State to cover the 8.5 because Houston was favored to win by 8.5 points. And Roger's like, I don't know, man. I was like, put $1 on it. I got this. And then as soon as Roger, placed the bet, he goes, okay, done. And I was like, I just forgot how smart Vegas is. And then I'm watching the game. And dude, Roger, how on earth? Because I ended up winning the bet because Houston won by 8, not 9. But it came down to the last 10 seconds on whether they were going to win by 8 or 9 or 10. And I remember texting Roger like, do you think like somebody's got to have money on this? Because why is Iowa State still trying with 30 seconds left and they're down by 10? Why are they still trying at this point? And it's like, it's just amazing. How on earth does Vegas, how do they know that? How do they
We need to put a call
close?
out, right? We need to put a call out to, like, now I know a lot of that stuff's automated, but I want to know how the bookies did it, before everything was, because once you get into the season, it's all just, hey, every player, you got enough data points, right? So you say, hey, this is every player, they average this amount of points per game, and you come out with their score and the other score, and it kind of works stuff out. But especially when you talk about the games early on in the year, and then when you have changes, right, with venue and players out and this and that, it's like, man, how are they so close? And I was sitting there, I was watching it on ESPN. My wife and I were watching one of our shows, and I had the app up because I know you were like on fire back and forth. I was telling my wife, I said, yeah, said he placed a bet on it, and it's 8.5 points. So they got to lose by no more than 8. It's either 8 or 9. 9 he loses, 8 he wins. And dude, 8 to 11 because they'd hit a 3. Then they'd hit a 3 and go back to 8. Then the 10. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you literally could not have written that story any better. So I'm kind of curious, how bookies, like, how do they come up with the odds? And I know they're wrong sometimes. Like some of these big blowouts you see, and nobody calls it. But I tell you what, Vegas was not built off winners. And so when you look at how they come up with these odds and how often they are down to a point or two, dude, I got to know how they do it. I mean, it's incredible, man. It's incredible.
Well, and they're right so often. Like you said, it's built on winners, not losers. And it's like, I would think, okay, because I think of Casino, right? The movie Casino with Robert De
Yeah.
Niro, Sharon Stone, Joe Pesci, where, Robert De Niro's character was long known as the best odds maker in the United States. Like he could make odds. And he they talked about that for a little while, like how he'd make odds, like he knew somebody was injured. He knew if, the star point guard's girlfriend was pregnant or whatever. But it's like, dude, scale that out. It's like there are not that many people working on this. It's like they know that Pop Isaacs on Texas Tech was accused of statutory rape or whatever. There's a civil suit against that. There aren't enough people to research because there's odds on like St. Mary's versus Incarnate Word. They
Did you see that fight?
Yeah, dude.
Oh my Lord.
And it's like, aren't these supposed to be private schools with like really smart kids and stuff, like upstanding citizens? But I don't know. I don't know how they do it. I think it would be fascinating. But again, getting somebody to come on and tell us how they do it is probably a long shot because I mean, there's money at stake here. I may do some research on that, man. Do some research on how they make odds and whatnot. So yeah, anyway, I think Roger's done. My Texas Tech Red Raiders are on there losing to TCU right now. Surprise, surprise. We ragged on Josh a little bit, but he's having a good time. And, no homo, but for a dude that's in his late 40s, posing on the beach, with his lats stretched out, dude looks pretty good. He needs a tan, but he looks pretty good. I'm glad he's having a good time with his wife and Mo and whoever else is there whoever else is there with them that is a listener. We appreciate y'all listening. We only went for an hour and 15 minutes, man. That's a record for me and Roger.
We did get started late though. That's part of it.
We did. Yeah, because I talked Roger's ear off complaining about stuff, and he helped me out. But we appreciate y'all listening. This is a little bit shorter one. I think Roger's on the road tomorrow, but I think next week we'll have another one, hopefully earlier in the week. We appreciate y'all listening, and in the meantime, keep your canteen cups full and tightly secured.